Hi, welcome everybody to the Escuela Virtual of the UNAN, Unión Americana de Numismática. I am the host, Dr. Damaris Mercado, the Executive Director with Dr. Rolando Testolino, host coordinator, and your English host today is Dr. Ignacio Olazagasti, Vice President of the Sociedad Numismática of Puerto Rico. And with you, Dr. Ignacio Olazagasti.
Welcome everybody to this new set of conferences of the UNAM Visual School. Dr. Brad Yonaka is a numismatic researcher specializing in Latin American, Middle Eastern, and select South Asian coinage. Today, he will talk about types in Mexican currency. He has given numerous talks at several greater Los Angeles area coin clubs, symposiums, and conventions, and has submitted numismatic exhibits to conferences and shows in North and Central America. He is member of ANA and ANSCSNA, ONS, Long Beach Coin Club, Greater Orange County Coin Club, Covina Coin Club, Ancient Coin Club of Los Angeles, the U.S. Mexican Numismatic Association, Numismatics International, Sociedad Numismática de México, SONUMEX, Unión Americana de Numismática, UNAM, and the Chopmark Collector Club. Brad has authored the following numismatic-related titles: A Variety Guide to the Fractional Pillar Coinage of Mexico City, 1732-1771, published 2016. A Variety Guide to the Pillar Coinage of the Guatemala, Bogotá, Lima, Potosí, and Santiago Mints, 1751-1772, in 2018. Rendering Divine Names on Coins, co-authored with David Bentley, 2019. A Variety Guide to the Silver and Copper Coinage of the Mexican City Mint, 1772-1821, in 2020. And Provisional Coins of El Salvador in the Central American Federation, co-authored with Roberto Jovel in 2020. And now, with you, Dr. Brad Yonaka, with his conference. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you, everyone. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Is everyone seeing that okay?
Yes.
Yes, it's okay.
Okay. My talk today, I'm Brad Yonaka. Thank you for that introduction. My talk today is on the milled pillar coinage of Mexico City. And I want to speak about both the history leading up to the striking of those coins and a bit about the varieties and aspects of those coins during its 40-year run at the Mexico City Mint. And first, I'd like to say thank you very much to UNAN. I'm honored to be giving a talk here. I gave one a few years ago with Senor Jovel on El Salvadorian coinage, and it's great to be back. And I really appreciate the efforts that UNAN goes to help numismatists everywhere. So here's the type of coin I'm going to talk about today. These are the pillar reales that were struck from a milled sheet of silver and implanted with an obverse and reverse design that was up to then not used in the Spanish Kingdom. And collectors really do gravitate toward these coins, I think, because has a great deal of aesthetic value. The obverse of the coin on which side the king's name is, shown on the left, is kind of a standard coat of arms of Spain with the royal crown on top. A bit of the legend around the edge, explaining who the King of Spain was king of, in this case, Spain itself and its colonies. And it has the, on the right, it has the denomination. In this case, it's the 8 reals. It's the dollar-sized coin. And then on the left is the assayer initial. And this was one of the first assayers that was at the mint when they began striking these coins. On the reverse, though, is what is really interesting about this coin. On the reverse of this coin, the sort of the revolutionary thing about it was the use of the mythological pillars of Hercules on the left and the right of the design. And these were basically reflecting the Straits of Gibraltar, a passage between the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic that Spain felt it could claim ownership of. And that led from the sort of the trading routes of the old world of Europe, leading them into the Atlantic, into the unknown across the Great Sea, and then to the new colonies that they now held in Central and South America. And both of these pillars are topped by the Spanish royal crown, suggesting that Spain felt that they were the predominant power over the Straits of Gibraltar and those routes. Between those pillars, we have 2 globes. The one on the left is the globe it shows the side of the world in which the New World is. You may be able to just barely make out the continents of North and South America. And the globe on the right is the old world of Europe and Asia. And the idea being that Spain, by topping that with a royal Spanish crown also, Spain was claiming to be the predominant power in all of those spheres. Below this, of course, are some waves, and these waves suggest the Atlantic Ocean. The legend around the side, Utraque Unum, mean together as one, meaning that the old world and the new world were being said to have been brought together by the Spanish kingdom. And then, of course, the mint mark of Mexico, which had been used for hundreds of years already before this, and then the date. So the 2 parts of the world that were instrumental to this type of coinage were, of course, the Viceroyalty of New Spain, which extended from northern Mexico down through Central America at that time in the 1700s. And then, of course, peninsular Spain, where the king lived and gave all the orders about what was to go on in the New World. And the 3 most important cities at that time, we're speaking about the coinage, were, of course, in the New World, Mexico City, where the mint was located and where they had been at least making hammered coins for over 200 years. And in peninsular Spain, of course, Madrid being the capital and the residence of the king most of the time. And the city of Seville, which was critical for being a port at which the treasure fleets would both leave and come back to, leave with exports for the New World and come back hopefully loaded with lots of silver, which the king desperately needed in order to fight his continuous wars on the European continent. Later on, the Seville also had all of the important trading houses. Although later the ships would only dock at the port of Cadiz on the coast of Spain, because that river eventually silted up and they were unable to bring the treasure fleet that far in. Really, we can trace back the changing of coinage from hammered to milled in Mexico City to an event that occurred in the year 1700. And this was the end of the Habsburg dynasty in Spain. Up until now, the Habsburgs had ruled, which was a royal house they shared with Austria, had placed its kings on the throne for many years. However, Charles II, the last Habsburg leader, died without issuing an heir. And this caused a scramble for the possession of the Spanish throne. The best claimant to that throne was not actually in the house of the Habsburgs, it was in the house of Bourbon, which was a French house. So they won over in terms of their legitimacy to take the throne, but they weren't going to do it without a fight. Now, when Philip V became King of Spain in 1700, he was from France. His grandfather was a French king, and he actually didn't know Spanish, and he didn't want to be king of anywhere, but particularly of a country where he didn't live. So he was quite unhappy. But nonetheless, he was installed on the throne and he began to rule Spain at that point. And I have shown here below the kings a couple of examples of their hammered coinage. Now, at the time, under the rule of the Habsburgs, it became known in the New World that they weren't really that interested in getting their hands dirty in colonial affairs. And this included the way in which the mints were operating. So the order at the time, which I obviously don't need to translate for anybody directly here, but was se guarda la orden, pero no se cumple, which meant in effect, let's pay attention to what the king says and always nod our heads, but in our actions, we will not carry out those orders if we don't like them. And when Philip V came to power in the House of Bourbon in France, became the most powerful, influential body in Spanish politics, they didn't like that. They felt that that was not a good way, and not a good way to run a business. The only thing Spain really needed from the New World was silver. So they felt they should go to any lengths to make sure that that process occurred with as little corruption and as most efficient, in a most efficient way that they could. So I have a few slides of a timeline. As we know, in 1700, Philip V takes the throne, and he's immediately embroiled in a 14-year war to establish his legitimacy in Spain and fight off the contending applicants for the throne from the Habsburgs in Austria-Hungary. And so, as much as I think the House of Bourbon and Philip's advisors wished to begin reforming the New World, they didn't have the time or the energy to do so during the war. However, by about 1713, it was obvious that the war was going in their favor and that they would soon vanquish any competition from the Habsburgs for the throne. So they began to institute some of the long-sought reforms that they'd been thinking about since 1700. And these sort of culminated in 1713 when some of Philip's advisors, a lot of whom were actually French, came up with the Nueva Planta, which was geared at two different things. First, it was geared at trying to reduce the amount of corruption and unreported cargo that was being placed on the treasure vessels coming from the New World to Spain, not just from Mexico, but also the ones from the Viceroyalty of Peru. So that was one part. And the other part was they wanted to reform the actual operations at the mints. To try to hurry this along, one of Philip's trusted advisors, a man by the name of Jose Patiño, who, by the way, was also not Spanish, he elevated Senor Patiño to the head of the Navy and the House of Contratación, or the minting house of New Spain and the other colonies. So he was placed in charge of this because he was trusted with a lot of loyalty to Philip. And he comes out to me as one of the characters who really did help Spain a lot in searching for a way to get a better deal for their money, for their investment in the New World colonies. There was a bit of a blip a bit later on in Philip's reign. After the War of Succession ended, he lost a lot of interest. Of course, as I said before, he wasn't that interested in being king initially. The War of Spanish Succession did get him a bit excited about issuing orders and so forth, but once it was over, he lost interest and he wished to retire. So he voluntarily abdicated the throne in 1724 to one of his sons, Louis I. Unfortunately for both of them, Louis I died within 9 months of taking the throne from illness, and this compelled Philip V to come back and continue ruling for over 20 years more. So this eventually led to the most important aspect of why Mexico City began making the pillar coins, was a decree of mint reform issued by the king in 1728. And this decree, among other things, was to modernize the equipment that was being used. In other words, get rid of the hammered coinage and get machines that could roll out silver, and a machine that would be able to punch the coins with a design using the screw press, which is the type of machinery that was available in Europe, but as so far had never been introduced into the New World. So this decree of mint reform was issued as though it was to be complied with immediately, which of course was impossible. The New World did not have the technology or the manpower to do anything of this sort, but at least it formed a basis for trying to hurry things along. So as you can see on the timeline, it took from 1728 until 1732 to actually produce the first milled pillar coin. The equipment had to be sent from Spain on ships. The dies had to be designed. And in fact, these were designed and examples were sent over from Spain to show Mexico how the coin should look. And another thing that had to be done was to root out all of the people at the mint who weren't doing their job correctly. And at first, this effort was actually meant to be applied to all the colonial mints, including that of Lima and Potosi. However, those latter mints were not in any state to achieve this type of coinage. So really, the Spanish crown just concentrated on Mexico City and tried to get that running first. During this time, the old mint facility had to be scrapped and a new one was constructed. And in fact, the construction of this new facility lasted from about 1730 until at least a year after the first strikes were made. So the building was not even complete when they began the upgrade of the technology for striking. And that's a picture at the bottom of the new mint facility that they made. And this is an often displayed rendition of a screw press. This is more or less the type of machine that was introduced to Mexico. The silver would be rolled out in long sheets, in flat sheets. It would be punched into a round planchet, and then that planchet would be placed underneath this machine and physical force would be applied to from working dyes to impress the coin with the needed design. Now, this process of changing over from cob coinage to milled coinage did not occur all at once, and in fact, it took 2 years, a bit over 2 years to achieve. And these are the 4 types. Basically, these are the 4 types of coinage that were. There were some minor subtypes that were also produced, but these are the 4 major types that they made during this time period. In 1732, a lot of the coins that were produced were of the cob type. Really, even though it was March when they first struck the first milled coins, which are shown at the bottom here. Here's the cob type and here's the milled type. Even though they did make some, they didn't make very many. And the ones that they did made, I'm sure it took a lot of time. The mint personnel were in no way prepared to produce those type of coins in volume, whereas they could produce many of the cob types quickly. And unfortunately, I believe in 1732 there was an issue with trying to get a certain quota of silver onto the treasure vessel, because they could only leave the ports from the New World to Spain at certain times of the year, and they really had to get that ship loaded. So most of their efforts went into a coinage type they could produce rapidly. However, since they did produce this coin, they knew they could do it. And today, if you collect the milled pillar coins from Mexico City, 1732 is by far the rarest date, and obviously, consequently, the most expensive date to collect in the series. In 1733, they were able to abandon altogether, as far as we know, the production of the purely hammered cob type coins. And instead, they began to produce 2, along with the milled coins, they were able to produce 2 what we can call intermediate types. They weren't intermediate in terms of learning the technology and progressing from one to the other, but it was rather the intermediate types were ways in which the mint could still achieve their production by producing coins that didn't take them as long to make, along with the coins that they should be making, which they were still in the process of learning and getting faster at doing. And the first intermediate type is an irregular flan that was hand cut from a silver bar. In other words, the initial process of making it was identical to the cobs, but rather than that being hammered, it was placed under the screw press, and which yielded a much better looking design, at least a much easier design to read than the cobs were. The intermediate type 2 was just a little step further than that, where they actually did roll out a sheet of silver as they were supposed to, but they didn't punch out a round planchet. Rather, they just cut the edges of that piece of silver until it achieved the weight that it was meant to, and then put that under the screw press. And note that the 2 intermediate types have an obverse and reverse design that is much more reflective of the old cob type coins, and doesn't look at all like what they were supposed to be producing, which was the coin at the bottom. So by 1734, virtually all the coins produced were of this type, the milled coin that they were supposed to be, by decree, supposed to be producing. And a very few examples of the intermediate type 2 appear on the market from now and then, but they're quite rare. So these are the coins from 1735 to 1771. These are the only silver coins that the Mexico City Mint was producing. The denominations were the 8 reals, the dollar size coin, half of that, the 4 reals, 2 reals, 1 real, and half real. And this basically reflected the denominations that they had previously been hammering as cobs. Now, in terms of rarity, most of the coins that they produced, both in the days of the cob coinage and now, were of the 8 real denomination. This is probably constituted 85 to 90% of the silver that came to the mint was used to make 8 reals. And this was because the 8 reals were by far the most efficient way that Mexico could be sending silver to
Ya
Spain.
me conecté el teléfono de la otra conferencia.
Now the minor denominations, the 4, 2, and 1 and half real, were struck in much, much smaller numbers because they were only meant to be used for the most part to circulate locally and support the local economy in Mexico. So they spanned the reign of 3 kings. Philip V, of course, was the first king who had his name placed on these coins. And his rule extended for about 15 years. When he died, Ferdinand VI took the throne, and he ruled until 1759. And then the last king of the last king who is shown on these coins is Charles III, who's shown with his name abbreviated on this 1765 1 real. But the interesting thing about Charles III was that when he came to power upon the death of Ferdinand VI, he actually issued an instruction to change the coins immediately and put his face on them. But for some reason or the other, which I have not really been able to determine conclusively, the order that he issued was not paid attention to. It was not applied for about 11 years. So rather than the coins changing to the new type, which would be the portrait type coinage, despite that should have happened in 1760, it ended up happening in 1772, meaning that the last coins with this pillar design were issued from the Mexico City Mint in 1771. They're very consistent. Really, only the name of the king changes and a few other minor design changes occurred in these coins during those 40 years. And they are consistent in fineness. There was no debasing of this series during its 40-year issue. However, one of the secret decrees that was issued prior to the issuing of these coins was that the silver fineness was dropped in 1732 from what it was before that, which was 0.925 fine silver, to 0.166 silver thereafter. And one of the innovations of this coin, which actually had a great impact on the international trading of pillar reals, was the application of a security edge. And they had a very particular machine that they would use to roll the coin through and apply this security edge to these coins. And this was very important because prior to this, the cob coinage was a victim of defrauding almost constantly. People would shave off very, very small amounts of the edges of the coins and then smooth them down, or they would put them in a big bag and just throw the bag around and try to get tiny bits of silver to flake off the coins, normally on the edges, and thus defraud the next user of that coin. And this caused a big problem when cobs were used in international trade, because everyone knew that the coins did not have the intrinsic value stated on the coin, and that they would have to be weighed in order to determine what they were really worth. And the application, the advent of these coins eliminated that entirely. Now, when someone held an 8 real in their hand, they knew that it had the amount of silver that it should. And those are the names of those 3 kings, as I was showing earlier. One of the consequences of the advent of pillar coinage was that now China could rely on the coins themselves, and they didn't. Normally, before this time, during cob coinage, any trade between the Spain and China, which normally took place in Manila and the Philippines, included having the coins put together in a large sack and then weighed together, because the Chinese knew very well that the coins were not worth the stated values on them. However, once the Chinese got used to these new coins, they began to see them as a much better trading currency, because now they knew that the coins were worth what they said they were worth. And rather than melting them down when they got to China, they would apply various banker marks, which we now call chop marks, and then allow them to circulate in China. And this really sped up this really helped with the trade and the efficiency of the trading between Spain and China. Now, most of the work I've done in these coins has not been about the history, but about the coins themselves, more of a statistical study. And what I wanted to do was determine really how rare were some of these dates and varieties for both the minor denominations and the 8 reals. And so to this end, I did a cataloging of all known varieties, overdates being the most collectible type of variety, but also other types of varieties, which include many other aspects of coin design, which I'll talk to momentarily. And I went through and did a die pair study, looking at exactly how many dies were used that I could determine for each date, for each variety, and I calculated all of those. So at this point, I think I have a very good handle on exactly how rare these coins are. Obviously, the data set I'm using is the whatever has come through an auction house in the past 20 or 30 years that has a photo attached to it, because without the photo, I have no way of being able to validate whether that coin is the same as another coin in a different auction. So I was able to do that for the half, 1, 2, and 4 reals. And as you can see, the total amount of coins for all of that I found was a bit over nearly 6,400. And you can also see there's a lot of difference in the total number of coins based on their denomination. The most abundant I found was the 2 reals, followed by the half real. A bit less was the 1 real, and a great deal more rare, as you would expect, are the 4 reals. For the 8 real denominations, which is all this data down here, I had to do a bit of a different, more abbreviated study, simply because there were too many of them to do a die pair study. I only looked at the die pairs for the rarer varieties, the overdates and the other major varieties. They are of great interest to collectors, so I felt it was worth my time to get a handle on those. But for the more common coins, I just counted them all, and just to try and get a total number of those for each date. And as you might expect, virtually all dates of the 8 reals, just a straight dated coin, are quite abundant. The exception being 1732. Now you'll notice that the issuing years I have for each king do not actually reflect the actual years that the king ruled, but how many years his name was placed on the coin. For example, when Philip V died in 1746, the Mexico City Mint only produced coins with his name on it throughout that year, and through about half of 1747, even though he had since been replaced with Ferdinand VI. Now, the reason they did that was not because they didn't know that Philip V had died, but rather they had to receive the official instruction from Spain of what the king's name should look like to inscribe on the coin. They could not change the design until they had an official order. The same thing happened when Ferdinand when Ferdinand VI died. Coins with his name extended into the following year after his death. So the types of varieties, when I did this study, I looked at all previous references, and I basically just added up all the different varieties that had been reported in them, particularly in the latest variety guide, which was one called The Columnarios of Central and South America by Frank Gilboy, which was published in 1999. I took that as a base to evaluate both the varieties that had been reported and new varieties that have come up since, of which there are many, and determine whether they're really good enough varieties to count, or whether they're just the details of them are too small and that collectors would not be interested. And this is a list of variety types that I evaluated were worth looking for. And I must stress it that when I use variety, I'm using it in a very numismatic sense. A variety is a change that has made on the die that's used to strike the coin. It is not something that happens while that coin is being struck. In other words, coins, certain strike-throughs, strike-through material, and other error and clipping and so forth, things that only happen with one coin are not varieties, they're errors. And anything that occurs repeatedly on many coins using that die over a period of a day or a week or whatever are varieties. So I won't go through all of these. As you can see, there are many. And they try to capture all of the changes, both big and relatively small, that occur in the designs of the coins from year to year, and even multiple times during the year, depending on what the mint and what the die sinkers capabilities were, and the things that they were faced with doing when they didn't have time to produce the dies in the way that they wanted to. For many collectors, one of the big attractions with this series, and was a big attraction for me, were the bold overdates that one can find in the series. And there are a lot of them. It was something that they did a lot in the mint. And I think this was because it was really hard to make a good, strong working die. So anything they could do to reuse a die that had been used for some other date or for some other assay or whatever, if they found that they could modify that die and continue using it, that was much more worth their time than making a new die altogether. And I have 4 examples of overdates here. The first one at the top left is a half real from 1748 with a very clear 7 underneath the date. This is one of the best, nicest, clearest overdates in the half real series. And here on the top right, I have what I've called a decade overdate. This coin was most probably, this working die was punched with only 3 numbers originally, 1, 7, and 3. And the idea being that it could be used in 1738 or 39 or whatever, simply by punching the last digit later. When 1740 came, it must have been that there were a lot of these 173 dies left over that they felt that should be utilized, even though it was now 1740. So they just punched over a 4 over the 3 in the decade spot. and they didn't have to do anything to modify the year spot here because there had been nothing punched on there previously. So they just put in a 0. And this occurred both in 1740 and in 41, I think in all denominations. Down on the bottom left, we have a 1750 over 49, in which it's clearly the case that they stamped over a 5 over 4, and also that a 0 has been stamped over a 9. So in this case, the full die had to be modified for the new decade with both digits. And then we have a very unusual case, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And I don't know if I'd believe it if I hadn't seen it in other coins from Latin America, particularly from Colombia later, was a backdating of a die. In this case, having a die prepared for 1770, but then coming to the previous to 1770, but then coming to the end of the year and realizing they had no more working dies that they needed to use in 1769. So they were forced to backdate a previously made working die, placing a 6 over the 7 and a 9 over the 0. Another very interesting thing about these coins is other overstrikings that were done. I show 2 examples here of coins in which one king's name was stamped over the other, because again, they didn't want to have to make a new die if they had an old die that was still serviceable. So in this case, on the left, we have the abbreviation for Ferdinand VI, which is FRD on the smaller coins, which has clearly been stamped over other letters. And it does appear that this F has been punched over a P, and the S has been punched, and the D has been punched over an S, because the 3-letter abbreviation for Philip V on this coin was PHS. And here's a beautiful example of a 8 reals in which the name of Carlos III was punched over that of Ferdinand VI, where very little effort was made to try and delete or try and erase or sand off the name of Ferdinand VI before applying the letters of Charles III. Then on the right is a different type of, it's an over-assayer. Now in 1733, there were 2 assayer combinations. The first was just the letter F for Francisco de la Pena. And later, his position was demoted to assistant assayer, and an assayer with the initial M was placed in charge. And so for the latter part of 1733, the F was replaced with M and F. And on this particular coin, it's clear that the initial die had been stamped only with the initial F on it, and that this was overstamped with both the M and the F, and the little floret that would have been bracketing the F on the bottom was partially erased by the application of that F later. Incorrect spellings on the coins, and these are very popular with collectors, and they're often the most expensive. Outside of the 1732, these are some of the most expensive coins on the market today. The left-hand coin is a 2 real from 1745, very well known misspelling of the word Hisp, which was an abbreviation for Hispania on the obverse in the obverse legend. And that particular coin, I believe, I've seen a number of them, but they're all the same die pair. In other words, this was a mistake that only occurred on one die, and at some point they discovered it and they were forced to retire the die. On the right we have a misspelling of the word utraque, where they put a U in the middle instead of an A. And this particular coin, this particular die is extremely rare. And I suspect it is because normally when a mistake like this happened, the mint would attempt to recall all extant examples of that on the market and try to get them back to the mint to remelt them and make new coins. But some escaped. And we have this very rare example still in existence today. Here's another mistake that was made, which there aren't very many of now, and they're quite interesting, and that is a 1736 half real with the assay or initial F. Now, in 1736, the assay or initials should be MF. So what this means is that the mint must have had an old working die from 1733 sitting around on the shelf that they weren't supposed to use, but for some reason they pulled it out and they used it anyway for a very limited number of coins. Maybe that was done intentionally, or maybe it was purely an accident and no one saw it right away. And another example, which was actually illegal and it should have gotten someone fired from their position at the mint, was this coin, a 1752 reals with Philip V shown as king. And Philip V had been dead for 3 years at this point. And everybody, by this time, the mint had been given the instruction to place Ferdinand's name on the coin. So this was technically not a legal coin to issue. Nevertheless, there are some examples. I've seen 7. Of course, they're all of the same die pair because I'm sure whenever I'm sure that once they caught this mistake, they immediately got rid of this obverse die and tried to recall all the ones that might have gotten out of the mint to remelt them. In 1733, there was a mistake made on the coins, which is actually a very rare and interesting variety. As you notice on the reverse of this coin, this is not the regular mint mark for Mexico City. It should be an M with an O above it. The reason this MX got on the coin is still not 100% clear, but it appears that when the instructions were made in Spain initially for the production of these coins, the person writing up the instructions in Spain was under the incorrect assumption that the M with the X next to it was in fact the mint mark of Mexico, which was not true. The mint mark of Mexico was actually the M with the O above it, but they didn't know this. So they wrote up the instruction incorrectly and it was sent to Mexico. When Mexico received this instruction, they knew it was incorrect, but because it was issued by Spain and the proper authorities, they were at a loss of how to deal with this. So in the end, they actually began to produce the coins with the mint mark that they knew that they were supposed to do. But at some point, someone decided we need to make these coins according to the actual rule that was handed to us. So they began to produce the M with the X next to it, knowing that that was wrong. And at some point, they just decided we're not going to do that anymore. And I think enough people looked at those coins and said, why did you do this? That it became clear what happened, that the mistake was not theirs, but rather Spain's. And it was rectified and we never saw this mint mark again. So as a consequence, these MX coins are quite rare in every denomination, except for some reason, the 1 real, there's a fair number of them. But very, very collectible and interesting. So to me, it's always been clear that these coins are really fun and interesting to collect. I like the continuity of them over the 40 years. And I like the historical and I suppose numismatically interesting aspect of them. I really like the aesthetics of the coin. I think they're a very nice balanced design that definitely that was much better in my mind than both the cobs that came before and the portrait reales that came after. And there's just a great deal of unknowns about them in terms of how many types of varieties, what other overdates might exist, other types of things. There's always new things being discovered in this series. And that's what one of the things that originally drew me to them was that I was beginning to find things that weren't in the books. And that's what interested me to write my own book and try to do a more comprehensive accounting for all of these things. And these are the books I've generated on the topic of both the pillar coins and then a book on the portrait reales. One newer book that came out in 2022 is kind of, it's the latest book is the Variety Guide to the Silver and Copper Coinage of the Mexico City Mint. And this is a combination of my first book, which is directly above it, which was only the minor varieties, but also including the 8 reals, which was a big job onto itself. And that is the latest book I have on it. There's been several varieties I've known about since that have been discovered since that. And so the data that I've shown and everything is basically from up to the production of this book in 2022. And that was my presentation. I thank you. Y yo sé que fue en inglés mi presentación, pero para la sesión de preguntas, por favor, si usted quiere, pregúntame en español y trato de contestar así. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this splendid lecture and a very well-documented theme. We would like to enter Dr. Testolino so they can work out the questions and answers and commentaries. And as you said, it's welcome in Spanish and in English. So Dr. Testolino.
Hi, everybody. I am Rolando Renato Testolino. I live in Argentina. I am host and coordinator in Numismatic Virtual School. Very interesting your class. They are Brother Yonaka, and I make a deliver of certificate of your speak.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Jorge Crespo has a question.
Saludos, saludos a todos. Me dijo el señor Yonaka que puedo hacer la pregunta en español. Or you like
Sí.
preparing in English?
No, está bien en español, sí, es más fácil.
Perfecto. Pues nada, lo primero, mi nombre es Jorge Crespo, estoy en Puerto Rico ahora. Y nada, lo primero que quiero hacer es felicitarlo. Ha sido una extraordinaria presentación. Y lo interesante, ¿me oyen?
Sí.
Okay.
Sí,
Lo
sí.
interesante es que es un tema extremadamente complicado y técnico. Sin embargo, la presentación yo la recibí como muy simple, muy clara, muy directa. La verdad que he aprendido muchísimo en este breve espacio de tiempo de cosas que había visto por encima, pero he aprendido muchas cosas interesantes. Así que le agradezco mucho esa participación. Tengo 2 preguntas particularmente. La primera es, estamos viendo que el modelo de la moneda acuñada, ¿no? Ya por la presa o por el cuño de volanta o screw press, que comenzó con este diseño en 1728, 1732, ¿Fue en México inmediatamente solo o pasó ese cambio tecnológico en otros mints simultáneamente o más tarde? ¿O fue al mismo tiempo? Esa es la primera
No,
pregunta.
no, es que técnicamente no fue posible usar esa tecnología en todas las secas en el mismo tiempo,
Okay.
a pesar de que eso fue el intento del rey. Pasó en México porque fue mucho más fácil allá, mucha más infraestructura y más rápido que llegue el equipo de España. En Lima, por ejemplo, ellos no podían convertir para hacer las monedas columnarios hasta 1751 y fue bastante difícil para ellos cumplir a esa fecha. Y fue más difícil todavía en Potosí. El primer moneda ya en esa forma de 1000 columnarios fue en 1768.
Pues mucho más tarde. Así que eso como que ejemplifica el nivel de avance, ¿no? Y de desarrollo económico y de infraestructura que tenía el virreinato de Nueva España en comparación con las otras regiones, ¿no?
Sí, en el caso de Potosí había otra complicación. Es que, como sabemos, del siglo anterior había bastante corrupción en la seca de Potosí en
Mm, claro.
1648 y ese tiempo. Y esa corrupción nunca salió completamente. Y la gente encargada de esa seca en Potosí no querían convertir porque sabían que su sistema de sacar un poco aquí y poco allá
Ujú,
no iba a funcionar cuando conviertan a la
claro.
tecnología nueva. Y había mucha resistencia allá.
Muy bien. Mi segunda pregunta, para dejar el paso a otros compañeros. Además de los shop marks, ha visto en su estudio, porque obviamente usted ha estudiado muchísimas de estas piezas, ha encontrado, identificado, por ejemplo, contramarcas como la Flor de Lis de Puerto Rico en este tipo de serie?
Eh, de, de, yo creo que sí. Yo no puedo decir qué fecha fue, pero yo creo que he visto unos.
No son comunes, me imagino.
Específicamente de la marca de Puerto Rico.
Me imagino que no son muy comunes, no, no.
No, no, súper, es bastante raro.
Ok, pues muchas gracias y de nuevo lo felicito.
A la orden.
Pregunta quién más tiene.
Another question or comment?
¿Alguien más tiene con algún comentario, alguna pregunta, alguna curiosidad que quiera compartir con el doctor?
Saludos a todos. Yo entré tarde. Me disculpen. Eh, I lost some of your training because I came in late. But from what I saw and excellent presentation. So I'm very glad to have joined. Even though I missed a little bit of it.
No, thank you.
Manfred Morales from Guatemala. Congratulations, Brad. Rafael Echevarría, excellent presentation, very educational. Carlos Gallego, excelente exposición, muy interesante tema. Manuel Galán, congratulations, Mr. Yonaka, for a very rich and detailed presentation.
Tengo una pregunta más, perdone, Jorge Crespo de nuevo. ¿Cómo podemos conseguir su libro, por lo menos el de 2022, que me interesa muchísimo?
Pues eso es un poco problemático. Yo vendí todos y he estado fuera de mi país casi 2 años y solo regresé ahorita.
Okay.
Estoy buscando una forma de hacer un imprimo nuevo de ese mismo libro, pero por supuesto, si quiere, me contacte y yo pongo usted en la lista para gente que voy a informar en caso que yo tenga éxito de imprimir.
Definitivo, si los que están coordinando pueden enviarle el correo electrónico del conferenciante, pues para que nos apunte. Por lo menos me apunta a mí desde
¿Y
entrada.
ahí?
Muchas gracias.
Testorino, el certificado, ¿verdad?
Yes, Mr. Yonaka.
No te
La Unión-
oímos,
sí,
Testolino.
La Unión Americana de Numismática, UNAN,
Lo está
la Escuela Virtual Numismática de UNAN, se complace en verificar que Brad Yonaka dictó la clase en idioma inglés Types in Mexican Currency en el curso virtual de numismática de la Escuela Virtual Numismática de UNAN, con una duración de 1 hora y media en el día de la fecha. Puerto Rico, 24 de septiembre de 2023. Tiene la firma de Jonathan Moscoso Briceño, que es su promotor ejecutivo, la doctora Damaris Mercado Martínez, que es la directora ejecutiva de la Escuela Virtual Numismática de UNAM. Lleva mi firma, Rolando Renato Testolino, asistente de la Escuela Virtual Numismática, y la firma del doctor Ignacio Olezagasti Colón, que fue el moderador en inglés de la Escuela Virtual Numismática de UNAM. Se lo vamos a hacer llegar el certificado.
Muchas gracias, fue un honor.
Again, many thanks to Dr. Brad Yonaka. Many thanks to the people who was interested giving some questions to this excellent lecture. And now we're moving to the second lecture of the afternoon. This time we're going to talk with Dr. Ángel Navarro Zayas, and his lecture will be History of Spanish Paper Money in Louisiana and the Caribbean Basin in the 18th century. Dr. Navarro Zayas was born in Puerto Rico, Doctor of Philosophy degree with a concentration in American history. His doctoral dissertation is titled The Process of the Exchange of the Mexican Silver Currency, the Impact of the Minting of the Provincial Peso of Puerto Rico, 1895-1896. Dr. Navarro has focused his research of studies on the monetary history of Puerto Rico and the Caribbean. He is author of Documentary Monetary History of Puerto Rico, Cup Coins, volumes 1 to 6. In addition, he has published his findings in peer-reviewed journals, such as the Boletín de la Real Academia de la Historia de España, the American Numismatic Society, Journal of Early American Numismatics, and the American Journal of Numismatics, American Numismatic Association, the Numismatics, the Numismatic Society of Puerto Rico, NumiExpo, Metal Collectors of America, the Advisory, and the journal Documenta and Instrumenta of the Complutense University of Madrid. Likewise, he publishes opinion columns in the Puerto Rican press, particularly in the El Nuevo Día newspaper. From 2020 to 2023, he received a yearly grant from the Eric P. Newman Numismatics Education Society, EVUNAN, the first Puerto Rican and Hispanic American to receive said grant. With you, it's a pleasure to me to introduce Dr. Ángel Navarro.
Thank you, Dr. Sagasti, for the introduction. I truly appreciate your time for everybody to be here and today. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see the screen, the whole screen? Let me see. Okay. Can you see the screen? Are we sharing the screen? Can you see it? Yes. Okay. Okay. As I was saying, okay. Thank you, Dr. Yonaka. As I was saying, today I'm gonna give a talk on history of Spanish paper money in Louisiana and the Caribbean Basin. Over the last 18 years, I have been researching the topic of paper money in Puerto Rico, and I'm having difficulty here. Hello, it's not moving. Is it's not moving. I haven't. Is the screen moving? Can't.
No le
so-
corre, doctor.
No, no pone la presentación.
Bájelo, sáquelo y vuelve a entrarlo, por favor.
Wait. Sorry for that. Let's try again.
Ponlo ahora en el número 2 y ahí lo abre. Marca el número 2, slide 2,
Oh, let's try.
para que entonces te abra en el 2 y puedas continuar ahí. No.
Okay, I'm sorry for that.
Ok, ya.
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you for your patience. In our research, we make a brief presentation and analysis of the paper money issued in 1781 in Puerto Rico under the reign of Carlos III and in Louisiana in 1782 in Cuba between 1781 and 1788 and the Hispaniola from 1782. All of these issuance of paper money responded to the lack of the Mexican situado, and also because of the war between England and the newly formed United States of America, and Spain was aiding the rebels in fighting for their independence. There was a previous issue of paper money from 1766, also due to the lack of the Mexican situado that arrived annually in Puerto Rico. This was done under the reign of by the governor Jose Dufresne, which was the governor during the 1780s in Puerto Rico. This was the issuance of paper money. They had to resort to the last resort. Very little is known about the monetary history of both issuance of paper money of 1766 and 1781. Nevertheless, this marks Puerto Rico as the first country in Latin America to issue paper money currency. As a continuous and ongoing search for Puerto Rico's paper currency from 1766, we found Louisiana's paper money issued under Spanish ruling that responds to the years 1782 and 1795. These findings were reported in the symposium in the Dominican Republic in 2018, and also in the American Numismatic Association in 2018. They received a prize for the third prize for best research during 2019. Also, part of this research was published in the Journal of Early American Numismatics in 2019. Both articles are online, which you can read the whole in archive.org and also at the Human Numismatic Portal. Puerto Rico and the Spanish Caribbean Basin received annually from the Viceroyalty of New Spain an amount of money, also known as the Mexican subsidy. When I talk to my students, I always compare in a similar way the Mexican subsidy as some of the transfers that Puerto Rico receives sometimes for annually from the federal government, like annual kind amount of money. This money was received in Puerto Rico for around 222 years, and it culminated when Puerto Rico, when Mexico gained its independence from Spain. If you want to read a really good book regarding this, the Situado Mexicano, you can read Fortaleza Situado by Dr. Jorge Crespo, published in 2005. I think it's the best book written about the Mexican Situado. Also, in the event that the Mexican subsidy or Situado did not arrive to Puerto Rico, the island would plunge into a major economic crisis. And during the second half of the 18th century, during the reign of Carlos III, Spain was fighting against England, aiding the newly formed United States. And one of the measures with negative effects on Puerto Rico as a result of the absence of the Mexican subsidy was the beginning of the issuance of paper money, or the so-called provisional paper money. This is the first evidence where it has been found that Puerto Rico did indeed make this paper money in 1766, which appeared in Pedro Tomás de Córdoba's memories. It's as a translation says, had to issue paper money of 8 reales due to a lack of coinage, paper money that later was going to be eliminated with the arrival of the Mexican subsidy. This book was published early in the 19th century in 1832. Pero Tomás de Córdoba, in his memories, he also stated that when the paper money began to be issued to the timely lack of the Mexican situado, then he states the amount of money that was issued during the reign of Carlos III. Now, historian Humberto Burcio, in his famous book of Diccionario of la Moneda Hispanoamericana, he wrote in 1958 that Puerto Rico has the privilege of surely having issued the first Spanish possession in America to issue paper money for lack of metallic currency. This singular event occurred within the Latin American monetary policy in 1810 due to the fact that the Mexican subsidy did not arrive. This is the more or less translation that I did. And he pointed out that it was in 1810, but he did not have, as shown, he did not have the reference at hand of the memories of Pedro Tomás de Córdoba, okay? So we, while researching, we found in the online catalogs of the Spanish portal, archive portal, it mentioned when I was looking up there about 15 years ago, it mentioned that there were some paper money that the pictures were not in the portal, the web portal. So I had to order them online and they received them. And it says that the paper money were made by engravings. We believe they were made by engraved wooden plates. So this is a picture of the General Archive of the Indies. And this is the paper money of Puerto Rico from 1781. As you can see there, that is the description in the catalog in Spanish. And I added as an English translation. It says Vale of 8 reales in circulation in Puerto Rico with the royal coat of arms engraved. And you can see when I first began this research in 2013, I only had 2 primary documents to reconstruct the history behind the issuance of this paper money of 1781. Part of this research was funded thanks to the Puerto Rican Numismatic Society, and which sponsored this the research. And I want to point out that to look at the right upper hand corner, on the right upper hand corner, we can see a stamp where it says Archivo de Indias. This will be the translation, General Archive of the Indies in Seville. And I want you to look closely to that because I'm going to point it out later on, okay? Just take a look at that. This is the original paper money, and it clearly states that it's from Puerto Rico. Okay, this is the other paper money, also from Puerto Rico. And you can see it has an amount. It says 313,709, which we will see later on in the primary documents that I had to use for reconstructing the history, that was the amount of paper money that was issued of 8 reales, okay? And also we found in the General Archive of the Indies the vale of 4 reales or 4 reales paper money. And let me show you something. You can see in this paper money of 8 reales, there are 2 signatures. When I first began this research 10 years ago, we only found out which one was one of the signatures, which responded to Gabriel Tinajero, which I'm going to show you shortly. The second signature we found out during this summer of 2023. I'm going to show you in a while. This is the second paper money of 4 reales that has a number of 29,000, which also corresponds to the amount of paper money of 4 reales that was to be issued for Puerto Rico in 1781. Okay. Also, you see the signature. There's a signature there, and that signature responds to the Gabriel Tinajero. Here is a translation of the primary document found in the General Archive of the Indies that I had to use to reconstruct the history behind the issuance of the paper money from 1781. And it says, it accounts for issuing paper money due to the lack of currency And then it says, I found myself in the last resort of using paper money as currency due to its lack. And I want to point out also, it says afterwards, as had been practiced in previous emergency. So this, over the last 10 years, this has been the only primary document manuscript that I've been able to find that it states that indeed there was a previous paper money done before 1781. So we're assuming, we're not supposed to assume, but we're deducting it could be referring to the one in 1766. So also it says red letters, you see right there, the red, I translated it to English, and it's blue, and it's for this purpose. Said paper money of two types was formed, some worth 8 reales, and then the other one of 4 reales, numbered, sealed with the royal arms and the royal officers in the manner shown in the two that I accompanied in the file. So this document was sent to Spain for them to have as an archive it in the General Archives of the Indies. And also, it also in the second document from the General Archive of the Indies states, for those printing, it says, you can clearly see the amount of money that was to be made. That's why I pointed out 313, 709, and 29,000. So you can clearly see it is paper money of Puerto Rico without a doubt. Here also you can see the signature, Gabriel Tinajero, in the middle, on the lower middle, and you can see both paper monies with the same signature of Gabriel Tinajero, which was the royal treasurer at the time in Puerto Rico. Also, this book that you see on the left has been published just recently, this past summer, by me, and it has to do with the paper money of Puerto Rico, and I had access to 512 primary documents regarding the issuance of paper money from 1781 to 1790. Very little is known about the issuance of paper money, and I have some interesting theories that I came up with Mr. Jorge Ortiz Murias in his book. So I want to point out this accountant paper manuscript, and I have the transcription in Spanish right here. This is the original document found, and it's presented in the prior book that I show you. This is the transcription of the document, and here's the translation. And I want to point out that it says on the left hand that says of 4 pesos, the paper money of 4 pesos, and it says also of 1 peso the first seal and of 1 peso the second seal. So there were 2 different kinds of paper money of 1 peso, one seal, and the second seal, 2 different seals. And also we know of the 4 reales, and also the 2 reales and 1 reales. So we, up until this summer, we did not know that there were issued fractional currency in Puerto Rico. We never knew that. It was 2 reales and 1 reales, and also a denomination of 4 pesos. So it, for us, is very exciting, and also for the numismatic community here in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, because it is a new highlight for. And now this is a transcription of the primary document found in the General Archive of the Indies, and it was presented in the book. And it says here, well, that the paper money was to be issued in first stamp, second stamp, and there you can clearly see the name of Don Fernando Casado, which corresponds to the second signature that was, we did not know who was in the paper money of 1781. Okay. No, I have to point out that the paper money of 2 reales and 1 reales and 4 pesos have never surfaced before, but this document evidence that it has existed in the 18th century. Okay. Also, very interesting, we found out in this book, well, in the documents, is that, I'm going to say Spanish first, naipes o cartones franceses, tintas y otros utensilios precisos a la habilitación de los billetes. So what this means is French playing cards or cardboard, ink, and other utensils necessary for issuing as paper money. So this is part of the documents found that were related to the Puerto Rico historical paper money from 1781, 1790. So what we're inferring is that Puerto Rico had to also issue during the 18th century paper money like the one issued in Cuba, which they used French playing cards. As we can see here, Jose Pulido de Ledesma published in 1985 that Cuba did indeed use French playing cards also during the decade of 1781 due to the lack of currency. Here you can see also Pulido de Ledesma and Moreno Fraginas published in 1987 that other specimens of French playing cards that were used in Cuba due to the lack of currency. Now, around 2017, I was doing research at home with my student, and we found with Dr. Roberto Muñoz Pando, we found this particular paper money of Puerto Rico, Cuba, and two of them were counterfeits from 18th century, and one was original French playing card, also from 18th century. This was published in Lumi Expo 2018. Also, this issuance of paper money is also from the decade of 1780, and it was used in the Hispaniola. Now, what I have a theory, is a wild theory, is that you see that the peso here, the 1 peso denomination, is kind of somehow similar to the one I previously showed you from Puerto Rico. Well, my wild hypothesis is that this could be similar to the second stamp, maybe, that could have been used in Puerto Rico. I was talking to Dr. Jorge Ortiz Muria, and he said it might be possible due to the closeness between the both islands, that it could have been similar to the one that you see right here. Okay, and there's also the 4 reales and 1 reales from Santo Domingo. Now, the relationship between the Spanish paper money of Puerto Rico in 1781 and the Spanish paper money of Louisiana. Okay, while searching for the paper money of 1766 of Puerto Rico, I came across this paper money of Louisiana of 8 reales from 1782 in the General Archive of the Indies. Also, I came across with this one from the General Archive of the Indies, also from Louisiana from 1782, and this one also from 1782 from Louisiana also. When I came across with this, I called up numismatic expert John Kraljevic, who was my first teacher, formal teacher on numismatics at the American Numismatic Association summer seminar, and he told me, Ángel, you should write up an article regarding this issuance of paper money. It would be a great article for. So that's how I came up with the publication on the American Numismatic Association in 2018. So, and I further went into the research, and when I asked John, where should I look up? And he told me, go to the Newman book and look it up. And to my surprise was that when I went to the Newman's book and to look up on Louisiana, I found on one of the pages that there was a similar paper money to the one that I published in 2014 in regarding Puerto Rico's issuing paper money. So now I want to go again until here on the stamp. You can see it right here on the upper right hand corner. This one here on the left is the one that was reported by Newman, and here you can see the one that was reported by me in 2014. So I want to show you this short video that I prepared, where I made an overlapping of both paper money. First, we're gonna see, this is the one that I reported I showed you before. The second one here is the one reported by Newman for Louisiana. And here I made an overlapping, and you can clearly see it's the same specimen of paper money. So once again, here the one I showed you earlier on, this is the one that was reported by Newman. And here you can see an overlapping of both paper money. So what I respectfully suggested, and I presented this at the symposium in 2018 in the Dominican Republic, and everybody's like, Ángel, it's the same, you know, it's the same paper money. So, uh, respectfully suggest that it was mistakenly attributed to Louisiana when in fact it was from Puerto Rico. So we do have the evidence that it was made for Puerto Rico. 1 second, let me go to the next page. Okay, so Newman stated in his book that this issue, that one issue soap was printed in Spain and was the first paper money prepared for Spain or its dominions. So Newman also thought that this was paper money was made for Louisiana, and it was the first of paper money issued by Spain for its dominions, where in fact you can see it's one that I showed you earlier from 1766 from Puerto Rico, which has not surfaced yet. Okay, and I also found during my research, I found some issuance of paper money for Louisiana from 1795, and there were 8 different models of paper money, and they were made by Jose Jimeno and Luis Paredes Alcázar, and the engraving was made by Jose Asensio. The ones that the royal vouchers that were for Louisiana relief, it was because they were made because Louisiana had a big fire in 1795, and due to the fire, the Spanish authorities made paper money to aid Louisiana. This is Luis Paredes Alcázar with self-portrait, which he sent to the King of Spain while he was exiled in Puerto Rico due to improper conduct in the King's court. So he sent a self-portrait to the King's court, so he had pity on him. But thankfully, Luis Paredes Alcázar, he came to Puerto Rico, and he had under his wing Jose Campeche Jordan, who was our first renowned Puerto Rican painter in our history. So a good thing that Paredes Alcázar was here in Puerto Rico is that he taught all the style of the Rococo to Jose Campeche, and he became the most famous Puerto Rican painter of the 18th century. You know, furthermore, Jose Campeche Jordan was the first illustrator of the first numismatic drawing of Puerto Rico during the 18th century. Now, Jose Antonio Jimeno was a printer and engraver born in Valencia. He was very famous during his time. And all of the findings of this paper money of Louisiana was published in this book, in the Historia Documental del Papel Moneda en Louisiana. The introduction was made by Don Pedro Damián Cano Borrego, and the prologue was made by the Dr. Damaris Mercado, for which I'm truly grateful. And here's the paper money of Louisiana. Now, it's very interesting to say out that this paper money was the only one pointed out that was shown in the book by Newman. This one, vale de 25 pesos. And although they were made, they were never used in Louisiana. They were made in October 1795. This one is also from 30 pesos, which is found in the General Archive of the Indies in Seville. And it's also made by Jose Jimeno. This is a 40 pesos, and also made by Jose Jimeno. This one is from 50 pesos, drawing by Luis Paredes Alcázar. And this one is 60 pesos, also made by Luis Paredes Alcázar in 1795. This one is 70 pesos, made by Jose Jimeno. And this one is 80 pesos, made also by Luis Paredes Alcázar. And there's another denomination of 90 pesos, made by Jose Jimeno, also in 1795. And the last one is the 100 pesos, 100 pesos, also made by Jose Jimeno. Then these paper money that I previously showed you, they were unknown in the numismatic literature in the United States. So back in 2017, when I was doing the research of this paper money, I wrote to Dr. Maria Teresa Muñoz Cerrulla, who kindly replied to my email, and she told me, on the subject that you indicate, I have not located anything. I checked the catalog of the archives of Madrid Mint, but there are no documents in this regard. I have reviewed everything I have on hand. I have found nothing. I will find something. If I find something, will write to you, and I'm going to ask colleagues a couple of questions without much hope, but we will try. She was extremely kind. She's always been very helpful of my research since I was a student. So, as a conclusion, the paper money of Spanish colonial New Orleans is a novel topic for us. We are certain that they are not reported in the numismatic literature in the United States. We have not been able to confirm yet that they're unknown to in the numismatic literature on the other side of the Atlantic. We have found very few primary sources to reconstruct the history behind this Louisiana paper money. If you want to look into the original primary documents that I have indeed find out, you can look them up at the Newman Numismatic Portal. The old when I recovered them from the web, I donated them to the Newman Numismatic Portal, and the transcriptions are also available in the Newman Numismatic Portal and at archive.org. Okay, so the exhaustive and thorough research has led to the looking for the paper money of Puerto Rico of 1766 has led us hand in hand to the discovery of both the paper money of 1781 and Louisiana paper money of 1782 and 1795, and the one that I show you from 1782. Quoting our good friend Dr. Jorge Crespo, whom I highly admire, when this discovery was made 10 years ago, he said, "This is the greatest numismatic discovery in our monetary history, perhaps in decades." These paper money of Puerto Rico of 1781 in denominations of 8 reales and 4 reales are the oldest ones reported up to date to Puerto Rico, and we probably dare say that there could be the oldest issues in Latin America. We can see that they are printed on one side only, unifacial, and as as I stated, both are signed by Gabriel Tinajero and Fernando Casado. All 4 copies that were identified have the royal seal. When I began this research around 10 years ago, I had to rely on 2 primary sources to reconstruct the issuance of the paper money of Puerto Rico. We have resorted to the literature secondary sources known among numismatists and historians to have a slightly clear idea about the issuance of paper money in 1781, although there is very little written about it until this last summer, 2023. So I was hoping that I could give this presentation at the Dominican Republic, but unfortunately I fell ill with COVID, so I was unable to travel to see our brothers and sisters in Dominican Republic. No copies of the 1766 paper money issued in Puerto Rico have ever been reported, and if they existed, where could they be found? Will they be in museums or in the archives of Spain? We hope that these findings of new copies of paper money will serve as a stimulus for further study of Puerto Rican numismatics and numismatic Hispanic heritage in the history of the United States and the Caribbean Basin. Now, another question that arises that I want to leave you with this is that since the paper money of Puerto Rico has not surfaced yet from 1766, and they haven't been found. It's not because they haven't been found, this doesn't mean that they don't exist. But the question arises is, did the other Spanish possessions issue paper money in the 1760s like they did, like Puerto Rico did, and all of them did in the 1780s? I mean, could they? I mean, all of them issued paper money during the 1780s due to the lack of Situado Mexicano. Could they have made? Could they be issued paper money during the 1760s? It could be possible. So further research needs to be done, as one of my colleagues used to say. So there's a bunch of people here I would like to thank. Uh, I wish I could name them all first. But thank you all. I truly appreciate your time, and I thank everybody for your time here with us. I'm ready to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for this very important lecture, very documented. And now is the time to Dr. Testolino run over the questions and comments of this.
Pídele a este que baje la.
Baja la
You can either
presentación.
ask in English. You can either ask in English or Spanish. It's no problem.
Doctor, ¿puede bajar la presentación?
Okay.
Meanwhile, on chat, Manfred Morales, excelente ponencia, felicitaciones. Doctora Maritza Torres y doctor Carlos Pérez, excelente, gracias por la presentación.
Gracias. Gracias, gracias.
Crespo tiene una pregunta.
Sí, realmente no es una pregunta, lo que quiero es nuevamente reconocer la gran labor que el doctor Ángel Navarro ha ido desarrollando, yo creo que por la pasada década. Lo que dije en el 2014, me reafirmo en ello, o sea, el descubrimiento que hizo de estos billetes de 1781 fue el descubrimiento en aquel momento más importante numismático en décadas. Imagínense que nuestro querido amigo Humberto Costa lo tenía en el radar screen, como dicen nosotros, no conocía que eso existía, nunca pudo verlo, pero eso fue importantísimo. Y como sucede en el mundo de los investigadores, y de esto Nacho sabe mucho, uno tira por una cosa y aparece otra. A veces no es lo que uno está buscando, y ahí pues aparecieron mucha información. Cuando él me presentó ese texto reciente de el posible uso de naipes franceses, barajas francesas, que yo lo conocí en Cuba por la obra de Levi Marrero. En Cuba era común, se usó, pero ahí decía claramente que en Puerto Rico también se compraron los utensilios para marcar los naipes franceses. Eso no se ha encontrado, pero el texto está ahí. Igualmente el billete de 4 pesos, una denominación bien extraña, aparece en esa tabla que él presentó. Así que no, yo lo felicito. Y
Gracias.
si el texto está, es muy posible que el artefacto exista en algún lugar, y en algún momento pues veremos nuevos descubrimientos. Y muchas gracias, Ángel, por ese trabajo.
Gracias, don Jorge. Gracias. Siempre apoyo siempre apoyo. Gracias.
Tengo
Ricardo.
una pregunta. Primero que nada, felicitaciones. Y más que una
Gracias.
pregunta, es como una incógnita. Si, número uno, estos billetes surgieron de una necesidad imperiosa.
Sí.
O sea, no fue acomodo ni idea creativa de nadie. Esto es porque el situado mexicano llevaba dinero hacia Puerto Rico. De la misma manera, llevaba dinero a Cuba y a la Española, lo que es República Dominicana. Habría que consultar o hacer un estudio de las otras secas, las otras fábricas de monedas, y cómo ellos distribuían las monedas hacia las otras colonias españolas, para entonces de ahí averiguar si alguna de esas colonias tuvo alguna necesidad parecida a la de Puerto Rico para que se expidiera billetes. Y otra cosa, número dos, pudiese ser que ese dinero impreso en Puerto Rico pudiera haber circulado en la colonia de Santo Domingo, porque es que el billete que tú mostraste de Santo Domingo tiene el mismo sello.
Es correcto. Gracias por la observación, don Ricardo. Por eso es exactamente eso mismo que yo estaba conversando cuando encontré esto, se lo comenté a don Jorge Ortiz Muria y le pregunté, mire, ¿sabes? Son bien similares, ¿sabes? Tenemos esta evidencia que nos sugiere que se usaron billetes fraccionales en Puerto Rico de 2 y de 1 reales. Vemos que en la República Dominicana, en la española, lo utilizaron. Vemos también que entonces en Cuba usan, si eso es conocido, que se usan los naipes franceses. Encontramos evidencia que también sugiere, que lo dice claramente, que en Puerto Rico se usaron naipes franceses para habilitarlos como papel moneda. Entonces, obviamente está todo interconectado porque todo es un andamiaje económico, ¿sabes? Entonces, pues sí, como usted bien dice, la teoría que yo tengo es, y esto es más, la teoría que yo tengo es que ese billete de la española puede ser el segundo sello de Puerto Rico, pero es una teoría, una hipótesis, como decían, bueno, una hipótesis, y como yo también le comenté eso mismo a don Jorge Proctor, y me dice, Ángel, pero es bueno que lo presente esa teoría, porque así otra persona que esté buscando y pues a lo mejor le da por dónde buscar, porque a lo mejor encuentra algo, pues Ángel dijo esto, a lo mejor pues, esto, ¿verdad? Es cierto, es falso, podemos descartar la teoría, la hipótesis, puede ser, puede no. Así que, y sí, es correcto, don Ricardo, sí puede ser. La cercanía que había entre todas las islas, obviamente, pues se presta para todo este andamiaje monetario, por así decirlo.
Y
Sí, gracias, don
entonces
Ricardo.
eso me llevaría a una tercera incógnita. Santo Domingo, ¿llegó a expedir alguna orden para impresión de papeletas?
Esa es muy buena pregunta. Yo creo que el que lo tiene que tener documentado más respecto de eso es don Miguel Estrella y Isaac Rutman en su libro. Yo creo que ellos lo tienen
Jorge
bastante
tiene otra
documentado ahí.
pregunta.
No he podido accesar a la fuente primaria, que es el libro de don Miguel Estrella y Isaac Rutman, pero yo creo que esa contestación tiene que estar en ese libro. Si en
Eso es
algún lugar
correcto.
está.
Porque es que es sencillamente las colonias de Santo Domingo y de Puerto Rico estaban muy cercanas. Y creo que lo que era legal en una también tenía que ser legal en otra. Esa es
Sí.
mi única incógnita.
No,
Gracias.
no, sí, muy buena, pero la contestación yo creo que la tiene el libro de don Miguel Estrella y don Isaac Ruman. Esa pregunta, la contestación está ahí, pero gracias por la pregunta, la voy a buscar también. Gracias.
Jorge,
¿Tiene
tienes
otra
otra
pregunta?
pregunta.
No, perdón, fue que no bajé la mano, perdona.
Ok. Bueno, entonces pues vamos a
Pásate esto lindo para que me certificado.
Tolino, el certificado.
Ok. Mientras tanto, en el chat, Carlos Gallego, muy buena su presentación. Rafael Chavarría, Orgullo Boricua, gracias.
Gracias, Rafael.
Lexil Roche, excelente trabajo.
Gracias.
Nuevamente, vamos a hacer entrega, así se ve. Unión Americana de Numismática, UNAM. La Escuela Virtual Numismática de UNAM se complace en certificar que Ángel Navarro Zayas dictó la clase en idioma inglés History of Spanish Paper Money in Louisiana and the Caribbean Basin, 18th Century, en el curso virtual de numismática de la Escuela Virtual Numismática de UNAM, con una duración de 1 hora y media en el día de la fecha. Puerto Rico, 24 de septiembre de 2023. Con la firma del promotor ejecutivo, Jonathan Moscoso. La doctora Damaris Mercado Martínez, directora ejecutiva de la Escuela Virtual Numismática, Rolando Testolino, moderador, y el doctor Ignacio Alessagasti Colón, moderador en inglés de la Escuela Virtual Numismática de UNAM. Le vamos a hacer llegar el certificado.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias.
We would like to thank Dr. Damaris Mercado and Dr. Rolando Testolino for the coordination of this first English virtual school. We recognize all the attendance of various parts of the American continent for this activity of UNAM. ¿Tú quieres decir algo? Thanks to everybody.